BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac Killer, but any subject is welcome. All right, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. First, giving a big thank you to everybody who checked out the AMA that came out over the weekend. As the introduction says, the AMAs, the Ask Me Anything segments, are normally scheduled for Wednesday, where I respond to your questions and comments, but because of some time constraints, they've been coming out on the weekend, sometimes an AMA, sometimes a debunking video. I created the debunking series where I talk about Zodiac killer suspects that I think are absolutely not the Zodiac. And this week, though, for the Zodiac Killer Channel's Interview with the Experts series, I interviewed Mark Hewitt, author of the Hunted trilogy, the Zodiac serial killer trilogy, Hunted, Profiled, and Exposed. It was an excellent discussion, so I thought anyway. I hope you guys will respond well to that, and that will be available on the Zodiac Killer channel very soon, so please feel free to subscribe to that channel as well. I'm the host of that program, but they also just have numerous videos out about various Zodiac killer suspects, and there are going to be many more people who are going to be interviewed for the Interviews with the Experts series. I thought a real benefit of talking to Mark Hewitt, or maybe not even a benefit, but just something that we created together, was the fact that I've talked to Mark Hewitt a couple times in the past. I've interviewed him for BlackBoxOnlineRadio twice, actually, and I'm familiar with his stuff, his theories. We've shared lots of ideas, numerous correspondences, and I could really see the contrast with somebody that I had talked to for that series, Ann Penn, who's the author of the What If book about the Golden State Killer Zodiac Solved. Because when I interviewed Ann Penn, that was the first time on the Zodiac Killer channel that I was talking to somebody, and both of us had no real idea who the other person was. We didn't know each other at all. I had heard of her book before, What If Golden State Killer Zodiac Solved, because she's all about the Golden State Zodiac Killer connection, the idea that Joe D'Angelo was both the Golden State Killer and the Zodiac Killer, and we shared a lot of ideas. I thought it was a really good discussion, even though that is a theory that I do not agree with. But she was completely unfamiliar with me, unfamiliar with Black Box Online Radio. She's like, Black Hawks Online Radio? What kind of stuff do you talk about? What Blackhawks do you mean? Is that like a hockey team from Illinois or something? And I was like, no, I talk about true crime, the Zodiac Killer, responding to people's questions, and Friday is an Anything Goes segment, where any subject is fair game. But in all seriousness, I had never really looked into her material. I was looking for a particular interview that she had done in the past that I saw pop up on someone else's channel. That was either taken down, or I was simply mistaken, or maybe it wasn't even an interview because it was just someone else talking about her book. So, talking to Mark Hewitt, I thought was very, it was a completely different world. Someone whom I've talked to in the past, someone whom I know personally, and we can share ideas back and forth and really build upon the previous conversations, and we also know a lot of the same people. So I invite you guys to visit the Zodiac Killer channel and listen to the Interviews with the Experts series, and there will be many more to come. And one person who has been a featured guest on Interviews with the Experts is none other than Mike Rodelli, the author of In the Shadow of Mount Diablo and The Hunt for Zodiac. Mike Rodelli believes that he has found the Zodiac Killer and identified him as a man named Kjell Qvale, born in Norway in 1919. You could call him a Norwegian American, perhaps, but Mike Rodelli has done even more than just share some ideas with me. He has actually authored something for this episode here. So when you see that AMA in the title, It's that time when I do something really tacky. Do you like really tacky things? Of course you do. It's not an Ask Me Anything today for Zodiac Mondays. This is an Ask Mike Anything. I did that once before when I did the Michael Cole AMA, and Michael Cole has also been on interviews with the experts. I mean, why not? Anyone is welcome. I hope to do many more, though, of those discussions on the Zodiac Killer channel, and some people have even just not responded or turned down the invitation to do the program, and I think it's a real shame because it'd be great if we just had like a massive assembly of, well, everyone, and I really wanted almost everyone to feel welcome. But welcome to the Ask Mike Anything, and first, I'm going to read something that Mike Rodelli has prepared for BlackBoxOnlineRadio. This is some exclusive BBOR content authored by Mike Rodelli for this show, and Mike Rodelli is going to lay out the case for Kjell Qvale being the Zodiac killer, and then I will get to your comments from some previous episodes. Now, everything that's going to happen after this is the writing of Mike Rodelli. In 1999, I had an idea that the Zodiac killer may have penned letters to the editors of the local San Francisco Bay Area newspapers before doing so as the Zodiac. This seemingly innocuous idea led to just one letter to the San Francisco Chronicle from June 26, 1969. This one letter, and in particular, the name of the person who wrote this letter and the evidence I found would eventually accumulate about him, opened my eyes to an entire world that had lain concealed just below the surface of the case for many years. As soon as I developed the name Kjell Qvale as the author of that letter, the pieces of the Zodiac puzzle began to fall quickly and steadily into place, with no pieces pointing in any other direction than toward his guild. The issue I have had over the years, is articulating why Qvale was the Zodiac killer. Yes, there is the behavioral profile by one of the pioneers in the field of forensic psychology, Richard Walter, that says the Zodiac was a wealthy and powerful man, one who killed for more power. Yes, there is the fact that Qvale is probably the only suspect developed over the course of the past 50 years who fits that profile, and then there is the mountain of circumstantial evidence that points directly at Qvale as the killer. But still determining exactly how to present my evidence in a concise manner has proven to be the challenge. I knew that I had solved the case, but convincing other people, including skeptics, that such was the case has remained an elusive thing. On October 21st, 2021, I was interviewed by the Fox TV affiliate in Sacramento. In the several days leading up to that interview, I was trying to figure out how best to use the 3 minutes that would be allotted to the segment. I decided to frame my discussion of the evidence by saying that Qvale is the only suspect who can best explain the known facts of the Zodiac universe. Qvale had reddish-brown hair. So did the Zodiac. Zodiac's likeness was captured in the SFPD wanted poster sketches on the night of October 11, 1969. Qvale was a dead ringer for the revised wanted poster, so much that the resemblance actually frightened one of the eyewitnesses who had contributed to those sketches. The Zodiac wrote on monarch-sized paper, so did Qvale in 2 letters that he sent me in 1999. Note that Qvale is the only one of the 3,000 or more suspects developed since 1969, at least to my knowledge, who can be proven to have written even one letter on monarch-sized stationery. Zodiac had a slow and deliberate manner of speaking. Likewise, Qvale is described not once but twice in news articles from 1955 to 1986. Zodiac killed on December 20th, 1968, and September 27th of 1969. Qvale's mother Signa died on December 20th. His father Bjarne was born on September 27th. The Zodiac chose to kill his first victims in what he apparently thought was Vallejo, California. Why might that have been? Did it mean that he lived there? Qvale was born in Trondheim, Norway, which was the only town with a sister city relationship with Vallejo as of December 1968. Another aspect of the Zodiac case, Qvale explains his Zodiac's seeming obsession with cars, motorcycles, fire trucks, buses, and other vehicles. As I state in my book, In the Shadow of Mount Diablo, The Shocking True Identity of the Zodiac Killer, The entire life of Kjell Qvale was centered on cars. He sold cars, he raced cars, he built cars, he drove the back roads of the Bay Area. Qvale's life would be unrecognizable were it not for the presence of cars. Likewise, Zodiac crimes, bomb threats, and letters were all heavily impacted by the presence of cars. He shot a car at Lake Herman. He wrote on a car door at Lake Berryessa. He used a car as a mobile crime scene in Presidio Heights. When he threatened to kill school children, he did so with a threat to blow up their bus. Many of his letters mention cars and other vehicles. Qvale explains the apparent Norse references in the case, such as slaves in the afterlife, Odin's cross, the 1974 SLA letter, the envelope for which reeks of a Zodiac letter, and the apparent Bumerka, or house sign, that is comprised of 2 Norse runes on the Avery Halloween card of October 1970. According to Richard Walter, the Zodiac killer killed for power. Up until December 1968, Qvale was deriving power from his business interests. After that, he felt the need to acquire even more power, and he decided to go outside and start killing people and then writing letters boasting about his crimes, which brought him the additional power that he felt he needed. However, there was seemingly an inexplicable gap in the Zodiac letters from December 20th of 1969 until April 20th of 1970. What was going on in the Zodiac's life during this time? How was Kjell Qvale deriving power during this time period, if not by writing letters as the Zodiac? From January until April of 1970, Qvale was involved in heavy negotiations to purchase Jensen Motors in Birmingham, England. These negotiations would have brought him a tremendous amount of power, as well as occupying his spare time, as he zeroed in on closing the deal to begin manufacturing his own British sports cars. The Jensen deal was closed in early of April of 1970, and while those negotiations were sent on, no Zodiac letters were sent. Then on April 20th, a week or 10 days after Qvale stopped deriving power from the negotiations and his time was up and freed again, the Zodiac letters began anew, as Qvale continued his quest for more power as the Zodiac. So even though this seemingly inexplicable gap in the Zodiac letters can potentially be accounted for by the events in Qvale's life. In the April 28, 1970, "Your ass is a dragon" letter, Zodiac suddenly asked the people of San Francisco and the Bay Area to begin wearing Zodiac-themed lapel buttons. Why? What would have caused him to do this? Beginning in the early 1960s, Qvale had an extremely close relationship with the world-famous racehorse Silky Sullivan, which Qvale had purchased. The horse meant at least as much to Qvale as one of his family members, arguably even more. In one of the most famous photos of Qvale with the horse taken at Golden Gate Fields Racetrack, where the horse was paraded every St. Patrick's Day, due to his Irish name, Silky Sullivan, Qvale is seen holding the reins of the horse and sporting some lapel buttons on his suit jacket, one of which read, "Honorary Irishman." In August of 1970, this very photo appeared in an article titled, "The Man Who Owns Silky Sullivan." It is conceivable that the author of the article, which obviously had to be completed well in advance of the August publication, asked Qvale for a photo of himself with the horse mid to late April of 1970. Seeing this photo may have well inspired Qvale to include the reference to lapel buttons out of the blue on April 28th of 1970. However, the one thing that Kjell Qvale explains almost perfectly, something that no other suspect I know of can explain anywhere near as well, is the geography of the Zodiac murders. First, there is the Riverside and 1966 murder of Sherry Jo Bates. Although the Zodiac may not have personally killed Miss Bates, it is very obvious that he was at least influenced by this murder. In particular, the letters were subsequently written about her murder. Although Qvale lived in San Francisco, just 2.5 blocks from where cab driver Paul Stein would be murdered by the Zodiac killer over 2 years after the Bates murder, and over 400 miles away from the city of Riverside, Qvale can be placed in Riverside on the very weekend that Bates was murdered, October 29th to 30th of 1966. This was because he had a car entered into the Los Angeles Grand Prix auto race that took place on the day Bates was killed. Note: even though Qvale's car was pulled from the race the day before that event for apparent safety reasons, he was placed in Riverside that weekend by the car's driver Bob Bondurant, which would make sense given that Qvale would have wanted to watch his car run in the race. Whoever the Zodiac was, he appeared to have good knowledge of the obscure back roads of the Bay Area, byways like Lake Herman Road. What type of person would have such knowledge? As far back as 1948, in an article in the San Francisco Chronicle, there is a photo of Qvale driving the unpaved back roads of Millbrae, north of San Francisco. And these types of back roads are known for sports drivers. Sports car drivers would have gotten to know them very well. After all, if you lived in San Francisco, you could not put an MG Triumph or Jensen Healey through its paces on Market Street. So where would you go? You'd take it to the obscure, hilly, tortuous backroads of Marin, Napa, and Solano County, such as Lake Herman Road. Lake Herman Road offered Qvale one more thing. Qvale raced horses at the Solano County Fairgrounds in the 1960s. The fastest way to get from that track to the racetrack is in Pleasanton, where there was a training oval that Qvale may have used to work his horses, and that was to travel from Solano County Fairgrounds racetrack down Columbus Parkway past Blue Rock Springs Park, where another Zodiac attack took place, and then east on Lake Herman Road. This therefore may have been a road with which Qvale was very familiar with, along with its Lover's Lane spots. As regarding Lake Berryessa, during the 1960s, Qvale owned a horse ranch on Money Road in the city of Oakville. Oakville lies about halfway between the city of Napa and Lake Berryessa. Aside from driving the back roads around Lake Berryessa and its environs in his British sports cars, Qvale may also have known Lake Berryessa for another reason. He may have known it itself for the reason of speedboats. Qvale was a self-admitted speed junkie, something that he emphasized to me in our 2006 face-to-face meeting. He loved fast cars, fast horses, and fast boats. In fact, in the early 1960s, Qvale owned property on Lake Tahoe and apparently had a speedboat there. After attacking Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard on the shores of Lake Berryessa, the Zodiac took over an hour to make his taunting phone call to the police from the phone booth in the city of Napa. This hour or so time window would have allowed Qvale to leave Lake Berryessa and return to his ranch in Oakville, quickly clean up and change clothes from the costume he wore at Lake Berryessa, and then drive to Napa to make the phone call. Once again, Qvale would have been in sync with the known geography of the Zodiac case. Last but not least, we come to the most challenging crime scene for most of the Zodiac researchers to account with respect to their suspect, Presidio Heights. That is because Presidio Heights is a wealthy enclave, and the average Zodiac suspect would have no business even being there, let alone learning its idiosyncrasies well enough to murder someone there. People will go to great lengths to make their suspect relevant to this crime scene, like saying he had a relative who lived only 20 or so blocks away from the neighborhood, or that their suspect knew the Presidio Heights neighborhood because they lived in Santa Cruz, which is some 75 miles distant. There simply are not many Zodiac suspects with provable and intimate ties to Presidio Heights. It is important to note that in 2012, SFPD Homicide Inspector Vince Repetto told me that he was certain that probably over 90% of the people living in San Francisco could not find the intersection of Washington and Cherry Streets, or presumably Washington and Maple Streets, on a map. That is because Presidio Heights is well west of downtown and way off the beaten path of cable cars, mass transit, and more importantly, the normal everyday activities of residents of the city. So how did the Zodiac get to know this obscure neighborhood? Qvale explains that too. In 1965, Qvale purchased property at 3636 Jackson Street in the Presidio Heights neighborhood, the heart of Presidio Heights, which was his main residence in 1969. So by the time the cab driver Paul Stein was murdered at the corner of Washington Street and Cherry Street, Qvale had been living in the neighborhood for about 4 years, which is plenty of time to learn its comings and goings on a given night, especially if Qvale walked a dog in the neighborhood every night, which, as we will soon see, he did on the night of the Stein murder. The Zodiac's original destination in the cab, as written down by Paul Stein in his logbook, was the intersection of Washington Street and Maple Street in Presidio Heights. This seems to get lost in the discussion of the murder, since the murder of Paul Stein famously took place 1 block further west at Washington Street and Cherry Street. But let's look at the potential significance of the Zodiac's activity given Stein the intersection of Washington and Maple Streets. Compared to the stretch of Cherry Street between Washington Street and Jackson Street, which is relatively flat or just slightly uphill, and where Zodiac actually walked that night, the section of Maple Street between Washington and Jackson Streets, where the Zodiac would have walked had the murder occurred at the original location given by the Zodiac to Stein, is a very steep hill from Washington to Jackson Street. In addition, there are no homes facing onto that stretch of Maple, and it was also very dark there in 1969 because there were many large trees that lined that part of Maple Street, and they seemed to overlap each other, and therefore would have blocked out the street lights. Qvale's home at 3636 Jackson Street was down this hill, across Jackson Street, at the midpoint on the north side of Jackson Street, and to the right at the bottom hill at Maple. It is crucial to know that Kjell Qvale was a former high school and college track star in the 100-yard dash. In about 1941, he even unofficially tied a world record in that event that was held by the immortal track star Jesse Owens. Owens was the star of the 1936 Berlin Olympics. Had Zodiac shot Stein at Washington and Maple Street, Qvale could have sprinted very quickly down the hill into the darkness of Maple Street, rounded the corner, and walked very briskly but unobtrusively to his home before anyone even realized that Stein had been killed. That may well have been the Zodiac's plan that night, a plan that somehow got foiled, forcing Qvale to ask Stein to go 1 additional block to Cherry Street. This led by being seen by the Robbins kid and eventually spotted by SFPD officer Don Falk. The Robbins kids carefully watched Zodiac at Washington and Cherry Street as he manipulated Paul Stein's body in the cab, wiped down the cab with what appeared to be a piece of Paul Stein's shirt, and then slowly and casually walked north on Cherry Street. Officer Falk spotted the Zodiac on the north side of Jackson Street, near the corner of Maple Street, but mistakenly looking for a black suspect at the time, took a quick look at him and then drove west towards the crime scene at Washington and Cherry Street. Shortly after arriving at the crime scene, SFPD officer Armin Pellicetti set off on foot going north on Cherry Street to Jackson, trying to catch up to the killer. He turned right on Jackson Street and headed toward Maple Street on the south side. When he arrived at Maple Street, he ran into a man walking his dog. That man, according to Armin Pellicetti, was Kjell Qvale, something Pellicetti is very adamant about. For his part, Qvale told me at our 2006 meeting that it was not he whom Pellicetti spoke to. Qvale said he only walked a dog twice in his life and should have been in England at that night. However, Qvale also said that once you learn his distinctive last name, which has a Q followed by a V, you never forget it. Based on his assertions over the years, there could be no doubt that Qvale was the person to whom Pellicetti spoke with that night. Why was Qvale out on the streets so soon after killing Stein? After all, he had been seen by the kids at the Washington and Cherry Street intersection, and as he walked away from the crime scene by Officer Falk near Jackson and Maple Streets, just 1 block or so from Qvale's home on the north side of the street, i.e. the same side of the street as Qvale's 3636 Jackson Street home, and headed in that direction. The answer is twofold. The Zodiac walked away from the Stein murder scene so slowly that he seemed to confirm what eyewitness Rebecca Robbins said to retired Vallejo PD detective Jim Dean in 2003, that the man who murdered Paul Stein never looked up at the Robbins home and had no idea that he had been seen by anyone killing Stein. This notion was reinforced in the killer's mind thereafter when Officer Falk took a quick look at him and drove past. This must have convinced Qvale that whomever the police were looking for that night, they were not looking for someone who looked like Kjell Qvale. Therefore, there was no reason why he would have gotten back on the streets shortly after arriving home after killing Stein. As the Zodiac, Qvale would have been out on the streets in order to, at the very least, garner details of the police investigation, to include his subsequent letters. As proof that the Zodiac was out on the streets of Presidio Heights shortly after the Stein murder, he described the sounds of the search, barking dogs, sounds of motorcycles, in his subsequent letters to the San Francisco Chronicle. The only way that you could report sounds occurring in the neighborhood would be if you were actually present in the search area. This is proof that the Zodiac never left Presidio Heights that night, as many people have speculated. In conclusion, I believe that what separates Kjell Qvale from all of the other Zodiac suspects in the case, aside from the fact that he is one of the scant few who even comes close to fitting the power-assertive profile of Richard Walter, is that Qvale's life history is also, to a very large extent, the life history of the Zodiac killer. And for that reason, he explains much about the known facts of the case that others simply cannot. Okay, and thank you so much. Those were the words of Mike Rodelli in a piece that he authored for BlackBoxOnlineRadio. And right now I would like to get to your questions and comments about Kjell Qvale from previous episodes of this channel. And I do have to really emphasize that I am very grateful that Mike Rodelli wanted to author something for the show. I really just have to get a website at some point in the future, and I'll just give like a big thank you section for all the contributions that people have made to this channel over the years. And also to remind you guys that you can download this program for free at LaunchPad 1. There's a link to that in the description box. You can download the audio version as a pure podcast and take it on the go. Of course, Amazon.com to look at the book Killer on a White Horse by me, Ned DeHaan, and the Teespring page. Remember, being weird is not a crime. Now let's look at what you guys have to say about Kjell Qvale. And first I should point out that many people, and I do mean perhaps even the majority of people who left comments on my Kjell Qvale episodes in the past, were talking about how they heard his voice on Tom Voigt's channel in a video clip that Tom Voigt had played where he was introducing himself and telling some parts of his life story. And they said he had a noticeable European accent. Kjell Qvale, of course, Norway, as you heard there, being born in Trondheim, Norway. So they just pointed out that Brian Hartnell did not describe an accent at Lake Berryessa. Nancy Slover said very clearly on videotape that she did not recognize any noticeable foreign accent in the Zodiac's voice. I'm just putting that out there, not even giving a major response, just because the majority of people pointed that one out, that they thought that it was something that should disqualify him. I believe it was Albert Forel who said something about that when because Albert is Swedish, I should remind you guys, and he said that he has an accent, but if you know to listen for it, yeah, you're going to hear it, but if you didn't know that you're going to be talking to a Norwegian, American, or European, then you wouldn't pay too much attention to that, because even though he did have an accent, he was very fluent in English. Now, let's look at a comment here from Jamie Hendrickson. Reasons why Kjell Qvale is definitely not the Zodiac killer. Number 1, he is too tall and too thin to fit the Blue Rock Springs and Lake Berryessa descriptions. Number 2, he voluntarily submitted to a DNA test. The real killer could never be certain he left no DNA behind. Number 3, we have absolutely zero instances of highly successful people and prominent citizens who are also serial killers. And number 4, he lived until 2013, which begs the question, why would he have stopped killing in the early 1970s? That last one, I can definitely, I was about to say take a stab at it, but I shouldn't use that phrase, so I won't. I can definitely attempt to answer that. There are numerous reasons why people think the Zodiac killer stopped activities in the 1970s. Number 1 could be there were some stressors in his life that altered the course of his thinking. Number 2, there could have been a decrease in testosterone, and then he simply did not get the feelings of gratification, and his actual biological chemistry and so on. His biochemistry was functioning a different way, and it didn't satiate the urges in that way, and he became indifferent to it. And number 3, some people think that the Zodiac crimes were meant to be a criminal masterpiece filled with mathematical signatures, that the Zodiac completed it, whatever it was, unconfirmed incidents or not, that it wasn't meant to be something about the biological urges or the chemical urges, that it was just meant to be completing a puzzle. And I don't know the answer to that. Those are just 3 different possibilities. And we had one from Colonel Reb that also pointed out that Kjell Qvale was too old to be the Zodiac Killer. As I said, born 1919. That means that he would have been 50 years old in 1969. Mike Rodelli actually responded to him on that episode saying, "One of the other things I have difficulty believing is that people don't understand the difference between chronological age and apparent age. Qvale always, during his life, looked much younger than he actually was. So this whole thing about looking at a piece of paper and saying he was 50 years old and that was too old to be the Zodiac is stupefyingly wrong. When Qvale was 90, people commented that he looked like he was in his 60s, so this argument is just completely baseless." But again, thanks to Mark Rodelli for responding to someone's point there. I completely accept that some people look older, some people look younger, some people look their exact age. Some people have an age that you just can't determine, and then no matter what they say, that you find that that's somewhat surprising. But remember, we don't only have the physical appearance. We also have the sound of the person's voice, and Brian Hartnell said 20 to 30 years old at Lake Berryessa, and he's not using some type of magical thinking in that, like it is just an estimation. Now, I would like to go to the next comment here from NPC Porky, who says, "I would like to believe that someone like Qvale was not the Zodiac Killer. I mean, why would a wealthy businessman go around killing him by himself?" I think Mike Rodelli covered that one in the essay when he said that it was about power. And I had read this comment previously from NPC Porky, and I was actually going to respond to it in a different way, saying that the theory was about thrill killing, and that is the very definition of thrill killing. Someone is killing for thrills. But Mike Rodelli responded in a different way in that essay, or, I mean, he didn't know about this comment, he just wrote the essay saying what he genuinely believes about the case, and he said it was about increasing his power, that there's the profile of someone who is a wealthy individual who is also a very powerful individual, and he wants to commit a series of power-based murders. Thrill killing, sure, but it's not just about fueling excitement. It's about having power over other people. So let's go to the next part of NPC Porky's comment. Generally, when a wealthy person wants to kill someone, they pay another person to do it. Also, if you think that Qvale was hiring someone to do the killings while he wrote the letters, that also makes no sense, since the writing left by the attacker at Lake Berryessa was on Hartnell's car door, and it matched the writing of the Zodiac letters. Yeah, but I don't think Mike Rodelli has ever accused Kjell Qvale of ordering other people to commit the murders, and he wrote the letters, so, not exactly sure. Serial killers are, for the most part, low working class individuals. We definitely do see that. I mean, we definitely do, no matter what serial killer is going to come to mind at first, you're probably going to think about how they are maybe not even low working class. Sometimes they could be high working class. Maybe they own a business, or they are involved with a 9-to-5 job, or that they are working in some type of company as an assistant manager. Or you'll see people like Herb Baumeister, the I-70 Strangler, who was running 2 different thrift stores. Like, he's the manager of 2 different stores. They work jobs like that. I actually think that the majority of cases that I've talked about on this channel fall into that category. And while I do agree that they do not fall into the businessman category, I would like to keep going in this comment here. Serial killers are often born in the same country where they commit their crimes, and they commit the killings by themselves. Qvale is far away from that. I will dispute that with you, though, that a serial killer commits the crimes in the same country where they are born, because I can think of so many exceptions to the rule, and let alone the unconfirmed theories. I mean, you even got Robert Graysmith writing a book about how he thought some guy came from the United Kingdom after committing the Jack the Ripper crimes, and that Jack the Ripper moved to San Francisco and actually committed other murders. I don't buy into that. Just pointing out these things are widely discussed. But, I mean, we have serial killers like Jack Unterweger, the poet of death, who started out in Europe and then came to the United States of America. I believe he was from Austria. And I was just watching this show that I found on Tubi called Bizarre Murders, and the second episode in that series was about a German-born serial killer who started out, like, she just really wanted to move to America, and he became a serial killer for a completely different reason, not exactly sexual motivation, but just committing one crime, and then he has to commit another series of crimes to cover it up because he assumed an American identity, and then people figured out that, he's somewhat of a fraud, so then he would murder a person. Again, that's not exactly doing it in a sexually based way. That was a financial motive. And, like, he came to America, and he's like, I have a German accent, and he had to practice losing it. I have a German accent. I have a German accent. I have no accent at all. And then, like, they showed that process through dramatizations. That was actually kind of cool. Bizarre Murders on the Tubi channel. And there are a lot of good true crime programs over there, actually. So, I know I didn't cite an enormous amount of credible examples of a serial killer committing crimes in their home country. But, of course, there are exceptions. All kinds of exceptions. What about Charles Ng, the partner of Leonard Lake? He was born in Hong Kong. They happen all the time, so I think that I will disagree with that part there. Jamie Hendrickson did author those 4 reasons why he thought that Kjell Qvale could not be the Zodiac killer, but in a different comment he says something very praiseworthy about Mike Rodelli's research and his theory. I don't see confirmation bias in Rodelli's research. He started with a methodology which led to a suspect. He did a good job. I just don't think he can tie Kjell Qvale to any other murders than Stein's. Even with Stein, he can only place Qvale on his own block. Qvale could have been the Zodiac, but there is no smoking gun to prove it. As to his age, Qvale always looked much younger, but still, he didn't look 25 in 1969. He also wasn't stocky. Rodelli counters by noting that Qvale was probably wearing layers while committing the Z crimes to look bigger. That's a very ad hoc explanation. It might be an ad hoc explanation, but it's definitely not an uncommon explanation. We will see that one all the time, day in and day out, that someone is going to be saying that their suspect wore layers to compensate for their skinny body. But he did place all the dates of the murders on significant dates of Qvale's life, birthdays, days of his parents passing away, and so on. And you heard that in the essay about December 20th of 1968 and September 27th of 1969. And Mike Rodelli can correct me if he wants, but I believe when Kjell Qvale met with Mike Rodelli in 2006 that he was supposed to meet him on September 20th, but then he postponed the meeting for a week, so it ended up being on September 27th, the anniversary of the Lake Berryessa stabbing. So, I mean, that there's chronology there. It's hard to know if these are mere examples of synchronicities. If you press Rodelli, he will retreat to an appeal to authority fallacy by citing all the renowned persons who agree with his research. I think that Jamie is referring to the profiler that you heard about, as well as the witness Lindsay Robbins, who seems to agree with some things here. But Drew Beeson left a comment on the Kjell Qvale episode talking about Norwegian influence in the Zodiac mystery, pointing out that Kjell Qvale is not the only suspect of Norwegian descent. Arthur Lee Allen was also of Norwegian descent. He said Arthur Lee Allen's grandfather was Arthur Ferdinand Hansen, who was born and raised in Norway. Just, I thought that was interesting. We had another comment from NPC Porky that says, the fact that Qvale actually accepted to meet face-to-face with Mike Rodelli instead of ignoring him or taking legal action is pretty damning against the case for him being the Zodiac. I still stand with my stated position. Qvale does not fit into the social class and the circumstance that would make him a serial killer. And I'm kind of 50-50 on that one. I mean, maybe if it were anybody else other than the Zodiac killer, because the Zodiac is all about taunts, and the Zodiac is all about trying to hide in plain sight, and openly giving people letters that are cluing him into his identity. The Halloween card, I know you ache to know my name. And Jamie has one here. Damning to Rodelli's case against Qvale, meaning I don't think a guilty person would do that. I could see a guilty person meeting with an accuser like Rodelli to taunt him. Here's something, though, that I frequently cite on the channel. Is from Inspector Mark Rowley from the UK. He was an investigator in the Madeleine McCann case, and what he recommended to us is, we cannot put ourselves in the minds of a homicidal maniac, in the minds of a serial killer, because we cannot understand the thought process of someone who is deranged purely just by evaluating their words. They're deranged for a reason, and just because we would do that doesn't mean we know what they're going to do. We do not know how a deranged person is going to respond to these things, so I wouldn't say that it's never going to be possible, but that someone would meet somebody like that just to taunt them. Who knows what people are capable of. Midnight Story Productions has one, but first I need to perhaps provide a little bit of context. I was saying something about how Kjell Qvale started learning piano in his 90s, and Midnight Story Productions says, don't let piano lessons and car sales fool ya. The Golden State Killer was cooking a roast in the oven when arrested. These kinds of people do ordinary, everyday things just like the rest of us. Absolutely spot on. We might not know how deranged people are thinking, but serial killers definitely do ordinary activities. Think about those things we were saying about being like the working class individual or the business owner. Like John Wayne Gacy worked with construction. He's running sort of makeshift odd jobs all the time. That's why he needed people to come put cement in his crawl space, right? And I said, Herb Ballmeister's running a couple stores. Ted Bundy was getting involved in local politics. And some people are just actually expanding their careers in genuine ways, and some people don't even need the crimes to be successful in their own minds. They instead want to create the crimes for a sense of thrill in their life, or as Mike Rodelli pointed out, it could be genuine power tripping. Good point. It's like people keep expecting these creeps that they're going to be found dirty and hairy and running around on all fours howling at the moon. And Mike Rodelli also responded to that, saying, wow, finally someone who seems to get it. If I listened to these podcasts, I would tend to say otherwise. My case is entirely circumstantial, does an injustice to a circumstantial evidence case. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty about the DNA or the fingerprints on the cab or anything else because they're difficult to address in one post. One food for thought item is this. I was able to convince one of the top behavioral profilers on the planet, one of the deans and indeed founders of the field of behavioral profiling named Richard Walter, that Qvale was the Zodiac killer. Anyone who thinks that was easy, or that I did so by saying that Qvale bore a vague resemblance to the composite sketch and was out walking his dog the night of the Stein murder, should have holes in their head. And it was Mr. Walter who drilled into my head that 70% of major cases are solved on circumstantial evidence alone, with no physical evidence. You want DNA, you want fingerprints that exclude suspects, but guess what? Sometimes you can't have those, and all you have is circumstantial evidence. And Mike has one more point here about why would Qvale meet with him if he were indeed the Zodiac, and he says, why? Maybe he had been looking for someone to do an intellectual battle with him for years, and finally that person had come along. Well, what do you think about Kjell Qvale as the Zodiac killer? As I said, he was born in Norway. He was born in 1919, 50 years old at the time of the Zodiac crimes. He primarily was a wealthy businessman. That would be the way you could describe him. Heavily involved with the import imports of automobiles. He may have been the lead importer of Volkswagen on the West Coast, a pioneer in the auto business. And what do you think about him as the Zodiac? And I had a big takeaway from Mike Rodelli's essay. I did not know that Trondheim, Norway, where Kjell Qvale was born, was a sister city of Vallejo. Now, I know I don't like to go on creepy feelings, but that's got my creepy feeling vibes to the nth degree right now. Definitely breaking into some new levels. And it just makes you curious about things. I cannot thank Mike Rodelli enough for authoring an essay and actually talking to me and trying to convince people of his theory and having the will to do so. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. And you can always visit the Zodiac Killer channel's Interviews with the Experts series. Okay, that's all for me now. See you on the Instagram bonus podcast. Why don't I say it the right way? See you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.